Good afternoon. We're streaming live on YouTube, and for everyone watching, if you want to ask a question during this event, please post it as a comment next to this live stream. Today, I will host a fireside chat with Vivek Kumar, VP of Products at Property Guru, a company based in Singapore and one of the leaders in PropTech in Southeast Asia. Hi, Vivek. Welcome to this ProductTank Sofia event.
Hey, Dido. Thanks for having me here.
Can you tell us more about you? How did you end up in product?
Well, that's a great question. So it started almost 17 years ago. Shit, I'm old. So 17 years back, at that point in time, India used to be very dominant in the IT services industry. So when I was working for one of the top services companies out there, I felt like we could do much more if there was a product company born out of India. So that was kind of nagging in my head, and it so happened that I joined one of the startups in India, which was into online gaming, and I started as a program manager. And my then boss said that, look, once you do program management, you've got two pathways. Either you can become a project manager and take program management to the next level, or you can choose to go down the path of product. And after a year of doing program management, I relished upon this opportunity of building YouTube for India. That was my first product, and that's kind of how I moved
Wow,
into
that's
product
exciting.
management. Way back in 2006, when broadband was not really there in India, it was an exciting time to actually build YouTube for India. That's how I got started.
Cool. And I could add from our initial conversation that you've also done product in Amazon, PayPal, Intuit. So you bring this really, really rich product experience with us today. Okay, so for the past couple of years, you are not only doing product, but you've also been a thought leader on infrequent products. And you've been writing blog posts on LinkedIn, on Reforge as well. I believe that's also a term that you coined yourself, infrequent products. So what are those exactly?
Hey, thank you for asking this. I realized that in my 17 years of career, almost 12 to 13 years has been spent managing these so-called infrequent products. And so when I was in PayPal, the definition of active user in PayPal was like once a year if someone were to transact peer-to-peer money transaction, that was deemed as an active user. Then come TurboTax, I realized that people just use it once a year during their tax season, and they don't think or care about TurboTax until the next tax season really comes in. And now at Property Guru, it's people rent or transact, buy properties very infrequently, like once in 2 years, or if someone was to buy properties, maybe twice or thrice in a lifetime. Um, and so what I realized was in my span of career, as I manage these products, there's no real playbook to manage these kind of products because most of the playbooks that has been out there has been written from folks who've been either running the Zingers of the world or Instagram. And so something as fundamental as even things like product market fit, you don't know how to do it for an infrequent product. Basically, any product which is sparsely used in a customer's lifetime, right? And for my own definition, I just say that anything that is possibly used less than 3 months, I call them an infrequent product because the propensity for you to just forget the product is pretty high. And so there are a lot of challenges managing this product, and that intrigued me, and I ended up writing about that.
Yeah. So basically, to sum up, um, once your product is being used, let's say once every 4 months or once a year, you're basically in uncharted territory because you can't apply what has been applied to Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, where you have a lot of daily users, uh, and you can actually observe a lot of how customers use that product. Whereas, as you mentioned, in those cases well, somebody needs to file their taxes, for example, once a year. They're not going to use that every week or even every month, right?
Now you're so right. So example, like for instance, if the the core work of product management, especially in products like Facebook and Instagram, or any of those high frequency products, are that people need to be retentive and they need to come back again and again. But and that also defines the product market fit. But when you look at the low frequency products, or infrequent products as I call them, there's no concept of retention. How do you retain someone who's wanting to buy a home? How do you retain someone who wants to date? And that kind of intrigued me, and that's how I started going down this path. And in fact, the trigger for me started with an article from Andrew Shen, who kind of wrote some time back about why dating sites really don't get funded. And the argument was really great. He said that, look, if you're a dating platform, the chances of you maximizing your LTV is going to be very minimal, because you've got a really slithered window in a user's lifetime, and you're going to pay a ton acquiring them. So how do you make the economics work? How do you maximize the lifetime value versus how do you manage the cost of acquisition? I thought that was a brilliant summary of what infrequent product managers go through, and hence I kind of wrote about that.
Sure. Makes sense. One interesting question that pops up immediately when you talk about infrequent products is how do you craft a winning strategy for those products? For example, Gibson Biddle, formerly at Netflix, whom I follow very much, has these very simple rules about strategy. So basically, it should be a way to delight your customers. It should be a way to build a hard to copy advantage, and also, of course, a way to earn a margin by offering this product. And from what I gather from what you said, infrequent products present a challenge in those areas. So how in your experience, or what is the best way in your experience to craft a good product strategy for an infrequent product?
All right. So, first of all, I'm a big fan of Gibson as well. I think he's done an incredible job of simplifying the whole strategy into just those three acronyms: DHM, as he calls it, delight, hard to copy, and margin enhancing. Yeah. So, look, that's great. So I'm going to pass your questions in two ways. The first one is you're asking me how do you craft strategy for infrequent products, which I feel is a tad different from what I really wrote about infrequent products. Now, what I wrote about infrequent products was more about how do you grow infrequent products, because they have their unique characteristics. And so I split infrequent products into four different dimensions. Now, before I get into those dimensions, one of the things I want to tell you is the real poster person for learning about infrequent products is this man named Richard Barton, who's the founder of Expedia, Glassdoor, and now Zillow. And what he's done extremely well is he's shown us the playbook of creating infrequent products. For instance, in Glassdoor, he had this hook of salary indicator, because even if you're not searching for a job, you want to go there quite often to just check how the salary is doing, how you're doing in terms of salary. In Zillow, he planted the seed of Zillow's estimate, which is your house valuation. While you're not buying properties, you might be wanting to check on how much is my property valued. So I think the germination of this whole concept of how do you manage an infrequent product, I kind of brought a bit of his playbook. And so if you were to pass this into four dimensions, I call this ICE. ICE stands for infrequency. C stands for control over experience. E stands for engagement. D for distinctiveness. Now, as I said, borrowing a leaf from the playbook of Richard Barton, what he's done really well is he's made an infrequent product kind of frequent product by kind of addressing some use cases which is very adjacent to the core product. Meaning Glassdoor, for instance, is a product about job reviews, job site, company reviews, and salary is a very adjacent use case that he planted there. So is estimate. So that's about moving from infrequency to frequency. And likewise, if you see, I've taken all these three dimensions, like some products like dating apps, they really don't have complete control over experience. You really don't know after you match make two of them how the date transpired, how did it go between them. So you kind of gain control over experience. Then engagement. Um, Look, the biggest problem in an infrequent app is that it has got unpredictable retention. I can't say when is this guy going to look next for a job. Then how do you manage such products? So that's kind of E. And the last one is distinctiveness. Airbnb, as much as um, it's a infrequent product. You don't travel Airbnb or you don't do Airbnb every day, but it's very distinctive and it holds a spot in our brain. So that's kind of iced, and then that's a framework for you to think about how do you grow your product. Um, but coming back to strategy, which was your question, look, I think in all my years of doing strategy for infrequent products, I believe depending on the kind of products that you're managing, either it's a marketplace or a SaaS solution, it is important that you base your strategy on a compelling insight that you have about that particular product, and then build your strategy based on that. And then you can apply the layers of what Gibson has actually talked about, which is DHM and what have you. But strategy per se has to be based on something compelling insight for your business, about your customer, and then you can add in the layers of moat and build a business product strategy around it.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Insights and data in general is one of the most important aspects. And I think a good question here to ask from your experience, how do you collect insights for infrequent products in the best possible way? I mean, you also mentioned that difficulty that comes from customers coming back very infrequently, maybe once a year or once every 6 months. And then you at the same time need good insights of, okay, what do the customers like? What do they don't like, right? And what would they like at some point? And what are their needs? What are some good ways to gather insights in that context?
This is an excellent question. Thank you for asking this. Look, through my experience, when I look at the lens of customer insights, one of the distinctions between gathering customer insights, and I'm talking about qualitative research here primarily, the quant insights are pretty much very akin to your frequency products, but I'll come to that in a bit. When we're talking about qualitative insights, all you need to remember is that the same playbook which is used for frequency products to understand customers may not work for your infrequent products. Why? Because this is not something that you go through on a regular basis. If I go and ask Lido, like, how was your house buying experience which you bought 4 years ago, you may not recall vividly what happened. Okay, 6 months
Exactly.
ago,
I forgot everything about the product and how I used it.
how you
Pretty
used
much.
it. And same thing in 6 months back. If I ask you, maybe you might remember one or two, these spiky pain points, if you will. Let's say, you had a tough time registering the house, or one of those two incidents, but nothing spectacularly vivid, so that we can base your product on this. So that is a very important element to keep in mind as you think about these infrequent product researches. So let's pass this further, yeah. So, um, so when you're researching for an infrequent product, there are two kinds of pain points you're going to arrive at. The one pain point that is very interesting is these are non-recurring pain points for an infrequent product. For example, when you're looking for a mortgage, home mortgage, let's say you're buying up, and then buying a loan, and then you're getting a loan. And that point in time, you need to fill up your form, which is tedious, but that's fine. You're not going to do this again and again. But the process of shortlisting a mortgage, which bank should I go with, which lender should I go with, that's kind of a recursive process, because you're going to go through a bit of search process to really discover who's you're going to go with. So when you weigh these two pain points, what you would see is people are generally more receptive to products which are solving recurring pain points as against one-time heavy lifting that you need to do. So that distinction needs to be borne in mind when you're looking at infrequent products. And when customers dishes, they kind of voice out their pain points, you need to be mindful of, is this hey, is this a one-time thing that they're just facing, or is it something that will happen to them on a recurring basis? And you have much more probability of success if you were to focus on the recurring pain points as against the one-time pain points that might occur. A case in point is the reason I was talking about the mortgage is most times the mortgage businesses that I advise or I consult with, they tell me that, look, we're going to give extraordinary speed to consumers and we're going to digitize the application, have really strong integration with banks and going to go down that path. This is great, but is that really a pain point?
Mhm.
Because they're going to do this once in a time and they might be okay to go ahead with this. And whereas you searching for a lender, knowing which is your real lowest interest rate, I think that is going to be a very, very key problem for you to solve. That's one. The second insight that you need to bear in mind is every time there's going to be a human component there, it's going to be very difficult for you to disrupt that relationship because it's so infrequent. Example, if you're trying to, uh, you know, um, look at a tax market, who are already wedded to their, let's say, chartered accountants, you're going to have a tough time to pull them towards you, because when it comes to financial, and if they have a lot of trust riding on a human, the products might have a lot of friction to actually scale up. So that's the second insight. So you need to watch out for, are there human trust elements there? Is the problem recurring? I think these are the two major points. And yeah, I think that's something for you to bear in mind as you look into it. So these are some pointers that are uniquely for low frequency products.
Cool, thanks for that. Good point. How do you run experiments to find out what's gonna work on those products? Do you have maybe a couple of good examples coming from products you've built?
Yeah, sure. Look, I think um, so. Let me just kind of go through your first question. The first question was about compelling insight. Yeah.
Mhm.
So example of a compelling insight is I was recently advising a startup, and in that, it's a marketplace for jobs, and so usually the way the marketplace generally works is that there's a strong Pareto that you see in the marketplace, meaning
Mhm.
few of those which is driving extraordinary benefits, like few listings actually giving you disproportionate number of returns. So let's take LinkedIn for example. The you would see that certain profiles are garnering more views and interest as against the rest of the profiles. There's an asymmetric distribution that exists. Now, the
Mhm.
question is, if you know this insight, how are you going to act upon that? That's what I mean by compelling insight. You should always make your strategy based on something that is uniquely yours in your compelling insight basis, which you can build your strategy on. So that's on that. Now,
Mhm.
coming back to your question, in terms of the other part of your question as to how do you think about experiments, it goes back to the way the ice works is that each dimension actually appeals to a benefit that could accrue to your business. Meaning, in eye of the ice means, do you want to penetrate more into the market? So let's kind of look into it. Yeah. So for instance, you're, let's say, running a job. You're a job marketplace, right?
Mhm.
And not everybody is going to be looking for a job at the same time. So let's say he just applied for a job. It's unlikely that he's going to refer his friend because his friend might be very happy in his job. So these are non-penetrable products. So in order to penetrate that, you need a solution which kind of gets people to be more frequent and more penetrable.
Mhm.
So, and also penetrability means most non-penetrable products like cars, like properties, are also very, very subject to macroeconomic cycles. Yeah. So when you
Yeah.
make it penetrable, like if you think about your WhatsApp, I mean, come recession or not, your WhatsApp usage doesn't correlate with that, right? So when you have the lever of frequency, it gives you a lot of penetrability in the market, and that adds in a lot of benefits as well. So the next one is, look, I've been doing well, but I need to bump up my average revenue per customer, or I need to increase my monetization. Then control over experience is the next lever for you to focus on. If you want to make sure that there are two kinds of products out here. There are some products which has got predictable retention. Example, tax. I know that if I'm not good, if I'm not really kind of messed it up, Lido is going to come back to me next year to file his taxes.
Yeah.
Predictable retention. But there are products on the other side of the spectrum which could be unpredictable. Like I may not know when someone is going to look out for a car next or a dating partner next. It's very unpredictable, right?
Mhm.
Depending on what is your outcome, you would want to increase the organic traffic by focusing on E of your retention, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And
Mhm.
D is all about just the clear sheer brand association, and you're not spending a penny in terms of getting people in. Like TripAdvisor, say if you were to look at Expedia's traffic in 2019, the amount of money they spent on traffic is almost 45% of their revenue. Whereas if you contrast this with Airbnb, similar domain, which is in the travel, 70% of theirs was direct traffic. That's because of the distinction. While
Mhm.
you see Expedia is far more commoditized in terms of their. Look, I have great respect for Expedia and it's a great product, but it's just that it's in a much more commoditized space as against Airbnb, which has got a distinct brand proposition. So depending on
So just a question, when you say 70% is spent on traffic, what do you mean exactly?
no, 70% is direct traffic or organic traffic. So
Ah,
that
sorry. Okay.
money is saved for you is all I'm
Yeah.
saying.
Mhm.
So overall, depending on what is the lever for your business that you want to pull at a point in time, you kind
Mhm.
of look at which of the dimensions that you want. You want to increase penetrability, you want to increase monetization, do you want to increase retention or engagement, and finally, do you want to increase your margins by getting your traffic in a much more subsidized way. Depending on what's your goal, you might want to choose one of those dimensions or a couple of those dimensions and experiment in that path.
Mm. So basically, I mean, one idea that comes to mind while listening to this is that if we use those four dimensions of the ICE framework, it could actually be a source of ideas and also even for our product strategy, right? So, for example, hey, we're in the space, we are very far left, we are so infrequent that it's difficult for us to actually know about our customers or even um, to function or to get insights for the product. Let's move a bit to becoming more frequent. Aha, okay, so our roadmap will actually be influenced by a lot of changes aiming at making, as an outcome, making that product more frequent, for example.
Absolutely. And I
Yeah.
suggest you pick up one or two dimensions at the best and kind
Mhm.
of go down this path and so that you know where you're diving deep. And I also strongly urge when you're starting fresh, then you should go down the path of E is the engagement and
Mhm.
the way a product market fit works for an infrequent product is is about penetration as against retention. So example,
Mhm.
if you're let's say managing WhatsApp, the way you're going to look at WhatsApp's product market fit is the Jan cohort is at let's say 50% retention. Feb
Mhm.
cohort is 60%. You're improving your product market fit month on month, depending on based on whatever features you're releasing. When you don't have a concept of retention, which is what the infrequent products are, then your way of ensuring there's a product market fit is about increasing the market penetration. The
Mhm.
more transactions you could actually do through your infrequent products, the higher your product market fit. And so, in order to do more transactions, you need to engage them right, and you need to kind of ladder the engagement over the period of time.
Mhm.
And so, if you're starting afresh, if this is your first dimension you got to work on, I strongly suggest starting with E, and then if you could work on other parallel dimensions at the same point in time, great. But E is the place to start, and then diversify into the rest of the other ones.
Mhm. What about, let's say, if we make a distinction between, let's say, a startup that is just starting with an idea about an infrequent product, let's say some platform where they'd like to sell fashion, for example, which is something you buy infrequently, and then compare that to a company that has already developed products in that space. Where does a startup start from? What's the best part of the ICE framework to start from, in your opinion?
Look, ICE framework gives you a way in which you can profile your company. So if you're looking
Mm-hmm.
out, my next blog should be out this week, where I
Mm-hmm.
present something called as an ICE theory canvas. And the ICE
Yeah.
theory canvas can actually help you kind of profile your company as to where you are at this snapshot of moment right now, where your product is in. And then you
Mm-hmm.
can see which one of these things you want to dial up or you want to stay. And that's kind of what this tool is going to give you. So let me take the same example that you've given in terms of fashion.
Mm-hmm.
Look, the engagement has three attributes in an infrequent product. The first attribute is what I call as complexity, the extent of complexity a product has. While a property is extremely complex, a payment solution is very simple on the other side. Meaning, if I want to transact something peer to peer using, let's say, PayPal, it's a very simple solution compared to that of you buying a property, let's say on Zillow or Rightmove or
Mm-hmm.
any of the leading property proptech firms. The second attribute for engagement is what I call as a touch, single touch and constant touch. Now, some products are just single touch. You use TripAdvisor just once when possibly you're traveling, and after that, you're not going to go to TripAdvisor pretty often. Whereas when you buy a Nike, when you buy a fashion, you're going to be in constant touch with this. Every time you're going to wear that brand, and someone is going to compliment you, or you feel good about it, the brand or the product is getting reinforced on you.
Mm-hmm.
And the third part is, as I said earlier, unpredictable retention and predictable retention, right? So depending on where your product falls in, so for a fashion brand, possibly there's a predicted, let's say something like Stitch Fix, it's possibly has predictable retention. It's got constant touch, and it's not very complex. It's pretty simple. It's somewhere in the middle. And so for this kind of a product, then you dial up the engagement first, depending on what you're looking
Mm-hmm.
at, and then go back to the other aspects of ICE.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Um, Actually, let's build a bit on complexity. Uh, Basically, one of your blog posts, you define complexity as the degree of perceived effort that a customer experiences while making a transaction. And that's also what you touched upon while you were giving us this example, which basically means I'm using the product. Hey, do I find it difficult or easy to use? In other words. Um, so how one of course complexity is an important enemy, if I could put it this way, every product manager, and has sent a lot of products to the graveyard. So while listening to you, I was wondering, do you have any good practices or any good tips and tricks on how to keep complexity low? Also, drawing on the framework that you talked about.
All right. So look, I think let me just explain what the complexity here is. The complexity
Mhm.
here actually means I'm talking about the nature of the product that is complex.
Mhm.
Meaning, if you are selecting a partner for life, it's a complex decision. There are so many variables out there, but you need to keep in mind. You're buying a furniture for your home. It's a complex decision because there are a lot many attributes that goes into the measurement has to be right, the color has to be, suiting your room. There's so many attributes that go in to ensure that it's fitting with your requirements. That is the complexity that I'm referring to, right?
Mhm.
Now, obviously, in the ICE theory, I've detailed many more strategies about dealing with complexity. But let me just throw out one. So, some of the complexity products, the way you can do this is deal with what you call as a safety net of you need to create a safety net in your products. So a great example of that is TurboTax. The way TurboTax actually does. So if, I don't know how many of them know about this. There is a TurboTax community which is called TurboTax Live.
Mhm.
So
So,
every
so TurboTax, just to mention to everyone, because it's not something we have here, but TurboTax is a solution through which you can actually file your taxes. I think it's based in the US, right?
It is. Thank you for
Yeah,
saying that. So,
yeah.
US, just for the listeners, the U.S. tax market is pretty complex. So,
Mhm,
TurboTax has done a brilliant job of helping people file their taxes by simplifying this whole convoluted tax process.
mhm,
And it's close to around $3 billion for $4 billion, not a $4 billion product, $3 to $4 billion product. Now, when we are talking about so TurboTax, like example, your tax situation could be pretty complex. You might have sold your house, you might have sold a lot of stocks last year, and then when you're filing taxes, you would have questions. So what TurboTax has done really well is it has gotten a community of people, which is part of what we call as TurboTax Live, and they
mhm,
help you answer the questions when you're going through your tax filing process. So as a safety net, you fall upon them. You say that, oh look, I've done this transaction. I'm a bit unclear about this. Can you help? And you see a whole community waiting for you to go out and respond. And that's pretty incredible user generated content platform that they've got, where the responsiveness is pretty good, the accuracy of
mhm,
the answer is pretty right. So that's a great thriving platform. Now this is one example of helping. A product which has got some kind of complexity. You don't take away the complexity. It's hard to take away the complexity.
mhm,
If someone has sold stocks, there's nothing that you can do about it. But you can provide them safety net to kind of help them navigate the pain. And so
mhm.
likewise, I've detailed a couple of other strategies which could help kind of deal with complexity, especially with respect to infrequent products.
Mhm. Okay. And we talk a lot about complexity, and you gave a great example. What is a sure indicator for you that the complexity is too much in a product? What is a practical way to just observe and say, "Hey, I can see so much complexity."
One yardstick is when I joined PayPal. I know there was this. I used to be part of a team which was primarily focused on behavioral sciences, and
Mhm,
way back in 2008, 2009, even before Idikri's book got released or got popular, we used to be focusing a lot on experimentation. So the first day I joined, they gave me this book called How We Decide by Jonah Lehrer. I think it's one of the most influential books that I've read, which is about how humans really decide when it comes to making decisions or choices, when they're creating choices.
mhm,
Now, one litmus, and this is out of that book, the one way you can know that if people are actually doing complex versus easy is how they decide. Meaning, anything that's simple, it's a fairly logical decision. It's an if else statement that they can do in their brain and compare and say that, okay, look, um, this makes sense. I'm going to send money to Dido, but the transaction is costing me a lot, so I might reconsider this channel and I might use another channel. Very simple, easy to do it. But the moment you start using your emotional aspect for decision making, then you're dealing with something complex. For instance, furnitures or house or partner. This is never a logical process. There's a lot of
mhm.
emotional concepts, components that go into the decision making, and you end up doing the decision. And that's one litmus test for you to know that if you're dealing with a complex category or a simple category.
Mm, mm. So basically, the one thing that came to mind while I was listening is that, yeah, that's fairly. I mean, it's fairly obvious that if you string up an emotional response or a negative emotional response in whoever's using the product, then wow, complexity is too much. And I guess another way to look at this is there are a lot of places where you can feel the pulse of your product users, like for example, Trustpilot, or even comments on your app in the App Store saying, "Hey, wow, it's so difficult" and whatnot. So I guess another way to look at it is look through those places where people tend to vent out, and then you also find out whether the emotional response that you bring is okay or not, right?
Yeah, so let me just explain on that a bit. So I'm just
Mm,
saying that there are too many variables to keep
mm,
in mind. By research, quoting that book, it says that you cannot make a very logical decision because you're now playing with too many parameters in your mind. So that
yeah.
time, it's much more of your emotional aspects that come at the forefront, and you go up with one of the choices that you make. Whereas when things are simple, there's just a couple of variables you're dealing with. Oh, this channel, I'm sending money to someone, the pricing is not good. Okay, I'm not going to do it, or I'm going to do it. That is a
Mhm.
fairly simple one, and so that's where logical brain takes over much more, or the logical aspects take over much more. That's one way to just decide. Like for instance, anything that like furniture, for example, it's a great example. Car is a great
Mm,
example. As much as you can be logical about some of these aspects, there is a pull that goes beyond you, and then you go about purchasing that.
yeah, good point. Okay. One of the things you mentioned during our conversation so far is product market fit. Very important, obviously, for a lot of products. Um, can you please give us a little bit more on how you determine whether an infrequent product has a product market fit, maybe like a real world example?
Sure. So when I talk about product market fit, I talk about two aspects there. So first of all, there is a distinction that you need to recognize between products in the world.
Mhm.
Um, and then the credit for this goes to Ravi Mehta, ex-CPO of Tinder. Um, once when we were chatting, he was telling me something which was extremely profound, which is about there are two kinds of products in this world. There are either entertainment products or there are utility products. So let me clarify. I, for one, was questioning why is this whole playbook of product management seem to be not getting us anywhere. Meaning, everyone knows that we need to solve customer problems, but if you solve customer problems, the probability of success of products are not that really high. So where's the gap? Every
Mhm.
company here possibly knows this playbook, and very few are getting it right time and again. So, is this the playbook wrong, or is there something wrong with the execution? Where exactly is the gap? Um, when I was exploring this more, and I was questioning some of these things, like all the blockbuster products of the internet, be it YouTube, be it Instagram, be it Twitch, any of these things, if you see, I don't think they could have come out of a conventional customer research.
Mm.
Uh, and then I started questioning, hey, how does this really work? If you can take an Instagram and can you reverse engineer to write a great problem statement? Difficult. And can you write a problem statement of whatever you think Instagram is and turn forward engineer to an Instagram of today? Again, that's difficult. And when I was fighting with this conundrum, I think Ravi kind of gave this clarity around there are two types of products, which are entertainment products, which are Instagram, your Twitch, your YouTube, and the utility products, Dropbox, and what have you, right?
Mhm.
Infrequent products are utility products mostly. I mean, not mostly, all of them mostly are utility products. You want to buy a property, look for a house, store your document in Dropbox. All of these are primarily utility products. Now, why is this important? Because all utility products have an offline business at some point in time. If you look at jobs, there were job agents initially before digital came and took it over. Travel, travel agents were there before digital kind of took it over. So, and there are still a lot of sectors where it's still not being made, it's still not completely digital. So I look at product market fit in two parts. Let's say today I'm starting a store in one of the locations in, let's say, Sofia, and I'm selling mobile. I'm just selling mobile devices. So the way I'm going to look at it is I'm going to start in this particular location, do well in that particular location, and if I'm doing well, I'm going to then take that money and expand into multiple other locations within Sofia. So that's kind of the thing, right? And this initial time, and that's how the offline businesses work. You set up a shop, you know you're doing well, and then you spawn yourself into other places, which is growth hacking. You take the same concept into the digital world. if your infrequent product is already a utility in the offline world, the way you need to think about is, are you doing as good as that infrequent retailer who's out there? And this part is what I call as an initial product market fit, right?
Mhm.
Let's say there is a top, let's take the example of tax. If you're going to create a tax software in Sofia, there's already an existing chartered accountant who's doing the business of that particular tax filing in that particular city, and
Mhm.
you won't want to compare yourself if you're outdoing that leading tax consultant in your city, and that's how you know that your product is actually resonating with customers. This phenomenon is what I call as an initial product market fit. But once you kind of beat, you kind of outdid them, the next part is, can you now unleash the power of digital and take it to many other places, because there's zero cost of distribution, there's actually zero marginal cost, and can you take it to much larger audiences? And that is what I call a true product market fit, because you're now unleashing the power of digital. So there are
Mhm.
two milestones. You need to see that your product is actually checking the boxes of initial product market fit, and then into a true product market fit. Now, if the industry has gone digital, there are other ways to do this, but I think in the scope of this talk, I'm going to let it be. But that the
Mhm.
concept is, you need to penetrate more and more. The more you penetrate the market, the higher the successful your product is.
Mhm. Uh, Yeah, makes sense. A couple of questions that come to mind here. So, let's say, how do you decide what exactly the metric to benchmark to would be between, let's say, your newly started digital business and the physical business you referred to?
It's easy, right? So, for instance, the tax example I gave you,
Mhm.
if you're doing X amount of customers tax filing, and if
Mhm.
that person is doing X amount of customers tax filing, you pretty much get the sense of how many customers or what kind of revenue. It could be any of these matrices that you could benchmark, but you would get a sense that, oh, people are coming to me and they're filing taxes. This sounds great. So it's a very clear, measurable metric that you can look at.
Mhm.
And once you're done with the initial product market fit, then the boundaries are a bit hazy, and then you can just all you need to do is, can I penetrate more? Can I penetrate more? And that's your only benchmark that you need to keep beating yourself.
Are there any cases where, for example, you'd have a different business model to your traditional competitor? Like, for example, let's take the tax example, right? So somebody is filing taxes for individuals and they charge a fee per filing every year. And then you have a different company where, let's say, you charge a yearly subscription for people, and you not only allow them to file their taxes in an easier way, but also give them lots of other useful information or whatnot that they're willing to pay for. So, are there uh, any way, let's say, any difficulties or challenges that you could foresee if there are different business models, for example?
Uh, okay, look, I'm suggesting what I'm suggesting is a framework to think about product market fit,
Hmm.
in terms of, because this is an utility business, because almost every infrequent product that you're going to pick up has got a digital, non-digital relevance. Um, so there's some other existing business which is already doing. You have a way to benchmark, unless
Hmm.
the industry has already gone digital. That's the only caveat out there. In which case, I've detailed in my blog as to how to do that. So that's a separate topic.
Hmm.
Now, if the fundamental value proposition is not good enough, you're not going to scale as much. So the to your point, let's say I've started this as an individual tax transaction, but I'm unable to break the barrier and convert more people into my product, because there is a other competitor who is doing a better job of a much more beefed up value proposition. Then I think the game is pretty much evident, and you need to kind of catch up or do better than them. That's kind of how it is. So the value proposition is something like, you do it like for every other product. However, once you get your value, assuming that you got your value proposition right, then the way to benchmark yourself is, are you beating your offline equivalent, or and then are you growing beyond that? That's kind of how it is. Assuming that the industry has not gone digital completely as yet.
Mhm. An interesting example, by the way, I was thinking today was, what if you have a marketplace price product, which basically is like two products in one. You know, on the one side you have demand, on the other side you have supply. Um, then how? I mean, what if there isn't one company that offers both in the industry, and you need to benchmark? Then what do you do? Do you benchmark to two different competitors, so one in demand, one in supply? How do you go about benchmarking a marketplace, for example?
First of all, I'm assuming this is a consumer-based marketplace you're talking about, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
look, let me take the example of property or job aggregators.
Hmm.
Let's take job aggregators. Yes, on one side you have consumers, the other side you have job agents who will be doing the same job. So you just need to
Exactly.
benchmark the agents to do it. This theory works irrespective of whether it's a SaaS, it's a marketplace. As long as you've got, I think, as long as you've got a digital business out there, I mean, a non-digital business out there, it's easy to
Hmm.
kind of benchmark because they're already there, thriving, and they validated the pain point. You're just bringing it digital and adding the bells and whistles that what a digital business can do and propelling it forward. So you have an existing benchmark to really look at.
Hmm. Okay. I think we have a question from the audience here. Um, let's do it this way. So basically, Boris is asking, is it good to combine infrequent products with services that are frequently used to acquire customers? For example, credit product offering daily financial planner. I guess that it would be what that means is, for example, offering a daily financial planner as a add-on to whatever you're offering.
That's a great question, by the way. Thanks for asking this, Boris. So one of the things that I detail in my ICE theory is that if you would want to increase the frequency, one of the ways is in which you can do this is by latching on to an existing habit product. Example, if you look at airlines, which you do travel in frequently, and then you combine that with your credit cards, which you frequently swipe, the air miles, which got latched onto the credit card, is an ingenious move because every time you swipe your card and you get your credit bill and what have you, you're reminded of your air miles, which in turn reminds you of your airlines, and that's kind of moving an infrequent product into a much more frequent space. So one of those strategies that you can employ, and there are a couple of others, and I talk about latching on to the habit products that are existing there, that's already existing, so that you can have a higher recall.
Good. So I guess we have a couple of more minutes. If you guys watching live have any questions, just post them as a comment. Otherwise, I'd like to ask one final question on my side, Vivek. What is the product that you wish you had invented and why?
Um, okay, look, I think a, a space that I'm very passionate about is business networking. And I feel like there's still a lot of under, um, we've not underserved market out there. So, the biggest place that we all flock to is LinkedIn. While LinkedIn is great, it's good. I think there's a lot more that can be done on the business space, and that's one product that I think I'll be very passionate about, and I would have really wanted to invent something in that space.
Good, thanks. I think it's a great place to end. I think. Thank you very much, Vivek, for joining us today and sharing your valuable insights. And we will, of course, post links to a lot of the things we mentioned today, also to Vivek's website and LinkedIn profile once we publish this video. So you can actually follow the blog posts he writes on infrequent products. Thanks once again.